technical difficulties that we have been experiencing. This afternoon, because we only have one vehicle and it seems as though we're going through bad patches in terms of signal, what we will be doing if that happens again is we will keep going to our brief tech loop, and if we're still without signal for a bit longer, then we'll be keeping you company with the Djuma Dam camera as a temporary option until we reach signal spots once again. Now there is a possibility that we might actually try swapping vehicles so that we change and I go on to Wendy instead of Rusty. Maybe that might make a difference. We'll keep our fingers crossed in that respect, and we'll just play it by ear. And we do give you a big apology, but also a big thank you for sticking with us. It's not always that easy bringing you a live safari from the middle of South Africa, or from the corner of South Africa, right in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes even the cell phone signal doesn't work. So the technology involved is just one of those things, and it's because we can't edit and we can't script and we can't plan, sometimes things just go a little bit haywire. But we do thank you for all of you for sticking with us. We are working on it, I promise. If we had an easy solution as to what's been happening with our signal, we would have fixed it by now, but at the moment it appears to be stumping our technical geniuses, and hopefully that's going to change relatively soon. It seems as though this particular patch is fairly stable. We should be okay from now. I'm going to try and stay where I think that we will have relatively stable signal, and we'll see where we go from there. Luckily, I don't have any, well, luckily, unluckily, depending on how you look at it, I don't have any tracks necessarily that I want to be following up on in terms of left or line tracks, and we've got an equal chance wherever we go. So we're happy to stick around the western corners. It's quiet this afternoon. I wonder where all of our animals are hiding. They should be out enjoying the sunshine and a break from being damp and rained upon. Here's one. Pretty far away though. Hello, little steenbokkie. Let's see if we can find a nice spot. Ooh, goodness. Don't disappear, little steen. Ran away. Oh, there he goes. Steenbok dashed off. That flash, it's amazing. You know, you couldn't see it because it ran away just before we managed to get a camera on it. You couldn't see it, but that flash of white underneath the tail, it's amazing how that draws the eye to the animal. It's one of those clever little techniques of a steenbok. If they're running away from something, they lift the tail up so that animal can follow them really clearly, that the eye is instantly drawn. And if you're a predator, they don't have the same level of color vision that we do. They do see certain colors, but most of what they see is in grayscale. So that eye is drawn to the white tail, and then as soon as the steenbok manages to get a little bit of distance from it, it zigs and it zags and then stops dead and drops its tail. And as soon as that white flash disappears, the predator's eye keeps following where they think it was going to be. It's known as flash coloration. It's a very, very clever little technique employed not just by certain mammal species like the steenbok, but also by other animals such as frogs. There's a couple of frog species with a very bright red strip that runs along the inside of their thighs as a way of surprising a predator and then drawing their eye and disappearing. Although it was fairly drizzly this morning, it wasn't a huge amount of rain that came through. Enough to fill up the dams a little bit over the last week or so, but this morning was fairly negligible. Gerard was wondering how much rain have we had since this morning or since yesterday evening, and apparently it's less than 2 mils, Gerard. It didn't seem like a huge amount. The puddles in the roads have already mostly dried up. not too much rain this morning. I think in total over the last week since that front rolled in, we've probably had somewhere close to 70 odd mils, which I'd like to know. I mean, we'll get some proper readings at the end of the rainy season. I'd like to know how much we've had in total in terms of rain. Typically for this area, probably about 450 odd mils would be the standard norm on the average rainy season. And I think we've had, now with this rain, just over 100, maybe about 150 or so, if I had to guess. Still, despite the big rains that we've had, and we are very grateful for them, still not enough to completely undo the effects of the drought, and also coming a bit too late for the grasses of this region. So although they are recovering to an extent, still not going to reach their full total heights that they would normally. Drive along, and since it is quiet, you'll probably find that we're going to stop and chat about a lot of the different plant species that we get out here. And Jamie D was wondering, Jamie D, same name as mine, if there are any plants that are deadly to the animals. And Jamie, yes there are, although it depends very much on the animal species. So for example, those mushrooms that I showed you, there's very few animals out here that I've ever seen nibbling on the funguses. That's probably because they can be equally as toxic to animals as they can to us. And for example, even with this tree, although we're very much straight into the light, this beautiful torchwood, the Balanites tree, that James loves to climb. Now, this is a tree that, whilst not toxic, has medicinal effects to the root systems. What that means is often elephants and porcupines, if they're feeling a little bit upset to the stomach, what they'll do is they'll dig down towards the base and have a look. Look at all that lichen as well on the tree's branches. That's really flourishing and green. Lichen, of course, being an interesting little combination of a bacteria and a fungus, and so essential to life without us realizing it. Breaks down rock and then converts it to sand, which then becomes the soil layer. And the soil layer determines the types of plants that you find, and the types of plants determine which types of animals you find in an area. So in a way, it all starts with rocks and lichens. But the root systems down there, those are the ones I was talking about. The roots of the Balanites, or the torchwood tree, give off an almost soapy feel, quite alkaline. And those are interesting way of settling an animal's stomach. So Jamie, I'm sort of expanding on your question from toxic to medicinal as well, just to give you a broader answer to the way in which the plants operate. But yes, there are toxic plants. There are, for example, poison apples, which belong to the tomato family, that are toxic to certain species, particularly the primates. You'll never see the primates eating them, but other animals can. It just depends on what their bodies are capable of dealing with. The famous tambuti tree, which you won't find in an area like this, so I can't show you at the moment, but if we do get to an area where I find some tambutis, more sort of closer towards the drainage line systems, I'll show you the milky latex that is inside them. And that is exceptionally toxic to human beings. One teaspoon of that, if you consumed it, would kill you, would kill a grown man. But yet elephants and black rhino absolutely love to munch on it. Determined by the different types of animals. Kathy Pickle, you were just saying that was such a beautiful tree. I agree with you. It's one of my favorites. Doesn't quite fall into my top 5 tree list, but definitely one of my favorites. And it's known as a torchwood, also sometimes referred to as a green thorn or a Y thorn because of the Y-shaped thorns. And when we find a nice little example, I'll be able to show you exactly why it's called that. also known as Balanites mugami, is the Latin name. Stunning tree, called a torchwood because the seeds have a very, very high oil content and burn exceptionally well. So they have been used in, as the name might suggest, producing a torch, a flaming light for the people of the area. There's also types of plants, to go back to Jamie's question, there's also types of plants, and I cannot for the life of me, I think there's the Crotalaria distica, which does this, and I think there's others as well. What they do is, if an animal eats the leaves, and they don't always seem to have an instinctive rejection of it, they don't seem to instinctively avoid this particular plant, but what it does to them is it inhibits an enzyme production that halts the growth of the hooves. And as a result, it can actually be toxic in its effects within the body itself, but the external effects that you see are long, curved hooves that grow out at the tip and look exceptionally uncomfortable, and they're very, very ungainly in the animals. And you see it more commonly in reserves without large predators, so on game farms and so on, where you'll see animals wandering around with long hooves, and that's obviously because there hasn't been a predator around to take them out, because it definitely is a huge disadvantage to the animals that consume it. I'll double check which plant it is exactly and just try and remember. It will come back to me. But for the most part, animals, as always, are demonstrating a far better understanding of what is good for them than human beings, and are very well aware of what to avoid. My favorite thing to do, am I going to do it? Yes, probably. Show you a comparison between two different types of trees, both with exactly the same effect. So what we have on our right is a spike thorn thicket. I'm just going to unplug myself quickly. There you go, you can see the leaves there. And if you look really closely, you might see some of the spines on them. So these species of trees are used medicinally as well. I'm going to grab some of them. As well as the tree on the left, the silver clusterleaf tree, which has a very similar effect within its leaves. Interesting, because generally silver cluster leaves grow far more towards the sort of seep line sections, whereas you see the spike thorns much more in drainage lines. So this is the silver cluster leaf. Beautiful silvery leaf, and if I turn it around, you can get an idea why it is known as silver cluster leaf. You've got very fine silvery hairs underneath the bottom of them. One of those clever little adaptations for leaves that allow to, or sort of prevent the plant from losing too much water in a hot climate. In contrast, the leaves of the spike thorn, very, very waxy, so not smooth at all, not velvety, but also covered in a film of wax that, again, same purpose, helps with the evaporation of water in the form of a gas. On both of them, when you chew on them, I'm not even going to offer poor VM. No, he's not having it. He says he's not a giraffe. Both of them, if you chew them, take away all of your saliva. It's a very astringent effect. I'm not going to munch them completely, otherwise my mouth will be sealed shut for the next 3 hours. Maybe you'd all appreciate that. Maybe I shouldn't chew away at them. So that's something that has an almost numbing effect. Really, my tongue is starting to feel very funny. Ugh. And I'm going to have a quick sip of water to try and regain equilibrium. It does feel rather numb. And it's a great way for us, if you ever find yourself in the bush with stomach problems, especially in a situation where you're lost in the bush and you don't want to lose water to gastric complaints such as diarrhea. 3 of those leaves, chewed and swallowed, will do wonders in terms of acting like Imodium. And having been desperate enough to try it once before, it does actually work. Well, either I got better or the leaves worked, but it happened straight after I ate the leaves, so I'm going to go with the leaves work. So one of those medicinal properties that is very, very useful to human beings. But interestingly, and this is something we chat a lot about, it's something that baby elephants target when they're teething. When their teeth are hurting them, they'll go and they'll chew on those plants. Generally, you don't see many animals eating them because of that astringent nature of the leaf. But you'll see baby elephants go and munch on them. It acts like tea gel, or that ulcer gel that you put on the teeth or the gums of teething toddlers when they start to squeal. Or I assume you do. I say that like I have much experience in terms of teething toddlers. Now, if you're a South African mother, that's what you do. You also then give your child a very, very large, thick stick of biltong. That was my chew toy when I was a child. Works exceptionally well, and you develop a taste for biltong. Sorry about this. We're going to have to jump off again. In theory, where is the Allen key gone? There it is. I'm just going to pop my antenna up, my aerial up, since your questions are not going to come through to me all that clearly. Oh, caught in the door. Now, a surprising amount that I have to remind myself how to tighten and loosen something. There we go. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. There we go. That should sort us out. Then we'll be able to hear your questions coming through more clearly. Make sure I don't lose that. Okay. Let us continue on. There we go. Much better. Much improved. A bit about the plants. Survey 94 on YouTube is wondering, are there certain ones that you should avoid? And the answer is yes. Things like poison apples and such like are quite a good example. Here's a nice useful little plant. Let me grab its leaves for you. Doing tree chat. Got a beautiful leadwood off to our left as well. Young leadwood. Now that's a tree to be avoided, survey 94. Not in terms of eating, doesn't really have much in nutritional value, but it's got thick, strong, very, very powerful spines on it. So spines are modified branches, unlike thorns, which are modified leaves. So a tree to be avoided if you don't want a flat tire, or alternatively if you ever find yourselves in flip-flops or thongs if you're Australian, because that's a bizarre way of referring to flip-flops or sandals, to be avoided when walking or jumping. One of them actually, a friend of mine accidentally jumped on a leadwood spine, and she ended up almost having to have surgery on the secondary infection because it went into the bone. It was so powerful that it went into the bone of her foot. Oh, gives me the shivers just thinking about it. The tip broke off in the bone part of her heel. Oof, horrendous. Right, one more. To plants not to be avoided, plants to be utilized. If you find yourself in the situation where perhaps the spike thorn leaves haven't worked, or you haven't managed to find yourself a spike thorn or a silver cluster leaf, and you have a medical or an evacuation of the bowels, this is your next step if you find yourself without toilet paper, colloquially known, strangely enough, as the toilet paper tree or the weeping wattle. Nice thick leaves, and most importantly, unlike quite a few of the plant species out here, a notable absence of thorns, thus performing a suitable role.
Danny,
yes.
Speaking of toilet paper, you think that's a civet?
Do I think that's a civet? Hey, that's interesting. Let me jump out and have a look at that. Yes, it could well be. Just want to go a bit closer. So a civet, a mysterious nocturnal animal of the area, one that we don't see all that often. No, you know what this is? Funnily enough, we're looking at this, right? Ah. Here's a question. Very typical shape. I'm going to bring it for you. Now, wildebeest is not that far off in terms of size of this particular dung. A civet, pound for pound, defecates the largest, what did I call it? It's the largest poo of any animal relative to its size I have ever seen. It's extraordinary to witness. But this is not civet poo, this is something else. Very, very typical shape for this particular animal. And there we go. I'll break it open for you, but I'm going to make you guys guess what this particular pile of poo happens to be. I'll break it open. Let me just dump that one there. Right. Unlike the civet feces, this is pure grass. Now, a civet is an insectivore. It runs around munching on insects, particularly millipede. But this is a coarse grass eater. And that shape, remember this shape. See if it reminds you of anything. The shape of this dung. It's very, very typical of this particular animal. Quiz time. Should be able to get it fairly quickly, so we'll take the first 3 answers very quickly. Which particular animal is responsible for that dung? And I think because you guys are getting so good at these quizzes and the way in which you've learnt alongside us, I think in future some of our quizzes will have to be time restricted, have to be restricted to the first 3 people that get it right. I was going to tell you something. Oh, I know actually where there's a civet tree. I'm going to go look for that as well. So civets, unlike this animal, have a set place in which they deposit their feces. It's known as the civetry. And as I was saying with plants, and that there's certain animals that can eat plants, or eat certain types of plants whilst others can't, the same goes for the civet and the millipedes. Most animals do not enjoy millipedes. They've got a cyanide effect to them. One of those interesting aspects, and it's a way of animals evolving to reduce the competition between them. Kathy, who is watching on YouTube. Kathy, what I'm going to tell you about could change your world if you ever happen to find it, unless you are, of course, vegetarian, in which case I do apologize. You were wondering what biltong is. Biltong, which is a very, very typical South African meal. Let's see if I back up a little bit. I hear you. You got one. Ah, there you are. Let's go back a little bit. It's one of my favorite little animals. Little dwarf mongoose, keeping a close eye on us. I heard them long before I saw them. They're little squeaking contact calls that the smallest predator in the Sabi Sands, or mammal predator at least, capable of sniffing and digging out anything from dung beetles to scorpions. They are famous scorpion tacklers. There's more in there.
Awesome.
I definitely saw one dash in there. Interesting how some dwarf mongoose groups are much more relaxed than others. Sorry, Kathy, I will get to your question in a moment. Here we go, foraging around. And whenever I see dwarf mongoose like this, I always look to see if there's any hornbill, yellow-billed hornbills, around the area. They've got quite a close relationship, those two species, bird and mongoose. Extra set of eyes for the mongoose up high, and the hornbills get to claim whatever sort of scraps there are left over from the mongoose kills. They don't want to play nicely though on screen. Oh, there was one. They're living in this termite mound up ahead of us. Let's see. don't see any heads poking out. I think they've all managed to evacuate and make their way across the road. Some groups are just naturally more shy than others. We'll keep our eyes peeled. We'll see if we can't get a nicer dwarf mongoose sighting than that. Kathy, I was telling you a bit about biltong. Now, biltong is a South African treat. It is dried and salted and spiced meat put together in a way that is a very traditional South African recipe, and of course something that stemmed from a time in which the fur trekkers moving through an area they didn't have fridges or storage facilities. We come from a very hot climate, and they had to try and figure out a way of making meat last for longer. And that's much like pickling fish or herrings or something like that. They came up with the idea of salting and drying the meat out. Now, South Africans, we are raised on it. Most people really enjoy it. It's the equivalent of jerky. But having tasted jerky, I have to be completely honest, it's really comparable. Have you ever tasted jerky, Liam? Don't worry, biltong's better. Biltong is hands down 10 times better. Now, apparently you can get vegetarian biltong as well. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that, but try it, yeah. Has been rated by Geraldine in Final Control. She says -5 out of 10, so we'll take her word for that. And biltong is made out of, traditionally, it can be anything from beef to venison, so the wild game biltong as well. Now, Jennifer and Susan, in answer to that dung quiz that I gave you, that quick dung quiz, have answered warthog, and they're very much on the right track. There's two animals that have a shape similar to that kidney-shaped or bean-shaped, but it's not a warthog. A warthog is slightly smaller than that. The animal we're looking for is considerably larger. Safari Dean has said owl. Safari Dean, unless it is a vegetarian owl, let's just see if this mongoose is going to pop its head back up. I don't know why they persist in settling in the middle of the termite mound, the termite mound in the middle of the road, but that is where they are. Safari Dean, I can sort of see what you mean. I've seen owl pellets before. But that being said, I don't know that many owls that feed on grass. Perhaps I should have clarified that dung was completely grass-based. So those bits that you were seeing were not fur, or bits of fur. And owls, of course, swallowing their prey whole. So if they're not producing the pellet balls that they throw up, you do get tufts of hair and bones in their feces when they scat. Hello, little mongoose. Yes, we're your friends. Watching us intently. Now, naturally, exceptionally curious little animals. And I have sat before for 10 or so odd minutes, 10, 15 minutes, right next to a group of dwarf mongooses, and just sat incredibly quietly, something that we can't really do on the live drives. And when I did that, they actually came right up and started climbing up my vehicle tires to investigate exactly what we were. Yes, little one. Making me feel horribly guilty about driving past you, but that's obviously, they know that vehicles pass over this area on a regular basis. As you can see, we're not the first to have passed through here today, and yet they seem to be quite happy there. Obviously, the passage of vehicles doesn't seem to bother them too much. Hello. There we go. We have our winners of the quiz. Jen, Donna and Pamela to our Who Dung It competition or quiz. You have got it absolutely correct. It was a zebra. So coarse, large pieces of grass, so not a ruminant that was munching on that. And then the kidney shape is what's usually very, very typical of a zebra dung. Now that was not fresh at all. You might have noticed the very pale color to it. Also, the termites had started to go to work on breaking down the dung. So not fresh zebra dung, pale in color and very dry, but zebra dung nonetheless, and easily identifiable by that their dung is almost a kidney bean shape, if I could describe it like that. I'm just looking around. Look, I'm looking at that termite mound. We spoke yesterday a lot about termites building and the fresh termite mounds. And there you have it. I think the question actually came from Naomi. I'm not sure if Naomi's watching. She asked about whether or not termite mounds get rained or washed away. But you can see that darkish color compared to the lighter bits. The darker parts are fresh building from termites, and that's all been done in the last 24 hours or so. So the speed at which termites add to their little mounds, particularly on cloudy days, which is why it's so noticeable now. On cloudy days when the soil is wet and easy to collect, their productivity in terms of adding to their budding termite mounds exceptionally rapid. Just an interesting little observation. One of those things that makes these live drives fun is not just you get to follow the stories of the animals, but you get to see things changing, not just day to day, but from morning until afternoon. And as I said, we are live, and for a new viewer that has joined us, Tusky was wondering, since they've just joined us, or she's just joined us, we're wondering where we are based. And the answer to that is we are on a place called, we have our own tiny little portion of a 4 million hectare area in the northeastern corner of South Africa. So part of the greater Kruger Park area, an area that most people I think have heard of. It's the largest conservation area in South Africa, one of the largest in Africa. Not quite the largest though. There are some tremendously impressive places in Central and Northern Africa. At Tusky, we are coming to you live from Djuma and Arathusa in the Sabi Sands. That's our little wonderful and much beloved portion of a conservation area that has remained unchanged and untouched for many, many years. Oh goodness, a heartbeat that is larger than the mongoose. I think this is our first antelope. It's incredible. We did have a steenbok, but the steenbok ran away from us. Spotted a nicer example. Oh no, don't go away, boy. Oh well, we'll go with the kudu bull that's walking across in front of us. I think it's our usual friendly collection of kudu males. Here goes the first one. We usually see about 5 of them together. And how's that to see how green everything is? To see the animals looking happy and healthy for the time being. Beautiful. Here's my favorite kudu bull, at least I think it's him. Oh, lots of impala rutting sounds as well. My favorite kudu bull is the one at the back. I love the shape of his horns. They're close together and they're so beautifully twirled. There's something very exciting happening up ahead. We're going to go and look. Sorry, kudu gentlemen, you are so beautiful. But I want to show you what the impala are currently up to, if they keep doing it. Yep, I was right. There's 5 of them here. The impala has stopped for the moment, so we're able to observe our kudu for now. Those marvelously thick necks holding up the incredible weight of those twisted and curled horns. A bachelor herd of kudu males. Not Zeus though, the famous Zeus the kudu. His horns are slightly further spread apart. Amazing how, having observed the way in which the animals work, how often we get to know the patterns of their movements and the way where we see sort of the same regular individuals. Let's go and get a nicer view of one of them. And at the same time, put ourselves in a position where we can watch the impala up to their shenanigans. Best view, but he is going to move. Hello, boys. I'm glad for Andreen that she got to get a sort of a sense of scale as to just how large those kudu bulls actually are. They are tremendously tall. It's probably out here in this particular section of the Kruger Park area. They're probably going to be the second largest antelope that you could see in terms of weight and the tallest in terms of height. Coming back to these rutting impala once we've got a nice view of the kudu. But Andreen, they are enormous. And they would stand probably just up at the shoulder, very close to my eye line in terms of height, just to give you a rough perspective of scale. I'm 5'7", if that helps to clarify a little bit. Don't disappear, boy. We want to show everyone how beautiful you are. Those long legs built for speed, not necessarily stamina in the same way something like a wildebeest is built. He's looking off intently. Oh, look at that. Really stunning, stunning bull. What you looking at, boy? A ridge of hair across his back, across onto his neck. There is. Is there another one in there? Mm-hmm. Oh yes, there I see movement. And as this kudu walks out into the road in front of us, it's one of the younger males, so not as clear as on the others, but those powerful front shoulders and the lumps around the top of the shoulder blades. Jamie D has put forward a really good suggestion, or asking, look at the scar, by the way, on that male's rump. He's suffered some kind of an injury that is now healing. And I think that was probably quite deep when it happened initially. But Jamie D was wondering, are there those lumps on top of the kudu's shoulders for fat storage? And no, not as far as I know, although it was really not a bad guess. In a way, you're thinking similar to a camel. And it's more for a muscle attachment point to hold up those horns. The horns, of course, being solid bone, unlike antlers of deer. In antelope, the horns are solid bone with a keratin sheath and exceptionally heavy to hold up. And because they're long, the longer, just due to the way that levers work, the longer something is, the more force is required to hold it up on the end of it, if that makes sense. So that versus that. The powerful shoulders and the powerful neck, those muscles are for holding the head up and then for fighting each other when it comes to that point where they're competing for the attention of the females. And that is what those lumps are for, more than for fat storage. Not quite as arid an area as the camels have to contend with. Nevertheless, still an animal that can adapt fairly well to dry conditions, just like a camel can. So in dry conditions, the kidney is working extra hard in a kudu to save or conserve water. The loop of Henle, as it's known, inside an animal's kidney, that is where most of the water reabsorption happens after the blood has been filtered. And in kudu and other species capable of surviving arid conditions, that loop of Henle is particularly long, and in the drought is capable of seriously concentrating the urine. And we find ourselves, unfortunately, blocking a gentleman who would like to use the main road out of the reserve, so let us just let him past us. And so our kudu are disappearing anyway. Well, I think we'll go and have a look at the impala that we're rutting. I'll just let this gentleman go past. Hello! It was Texan. Oh, quite a surprise there. We'll just let him move a bit further ahead of us. Since we were talking about the kudu and the way in which they absorb water for the drought, the gemsbok, or the oryx, an animal adapted for much more arid conditions, is capable of doing something similar, but not just that. They're also capable of tricking their brains into thinking that they are cooler than they actually are. So it's a sort of a feedback system, a loop that runs cooled down blood next to the blood that's going up towards the brain, and that then cools down the blood there, and that goes to the temperature receptors within the hypothalamus, the part of the brain that sits at the bottom. So what that does is it tricks the antelope into thinking that it's cooler, or the brain. First of all, it stops the brain from cooking, and second of all, it tricks it into thinking that the animal's body temperature is less than 40 degrees. And in that way, they're actually capable of lifting their body temperature right up. Just answer James's summons. Standing by.
Jamie, have you had any updates at all?
Negative, James, unfortunately not. James just wondering if I have any updates for him in terms of animal sightings. I want to go up along Sandy Patch and just see how things are. James, apparently there's a nice wildebeest sighting at the Djuma Pan. Something might be worth us going and investigating, depending on how things work out around here. I'm not going to go all the way to Sydney's Dam because I don't think that our signal will manage it. We'll just follow up on these impala that have stopped their games. This is not going to be the clearest example, but impala. Chat a little bit about Leopard's question. Go, as they move into the dense vegetation. And this applies, sorry, excuse me, lost my voice there for a second. This applies as well to the kudu and to all antelope species. So Leopard was wondering, why is it in certain species try not to talk and drink at the same time. Oops. Leopard was wondering why certain species of antelope, the females have horns and in some they don't. And the answer to that, Leopard, is there's a very, very strong correlation between the females having horns and the environment in which they live. So having horns serves two purposes. One is defense against predators. The other is other males and competing with other males in order to pass on their genetics. So for animals like the wildebeest, for example, that are running around the pan at the moment, they live in a more open environment. They tend to frequent open woodland or clearings, grassland clearings. That is where they like to be. And thus the females have horns in order to protect themselves and to protect their offspring from predators. All of the more closed off vegetation that little bit of a signal break up there. So antelope species that inhabit dense vegetation, they rely more on hiding away than they do on fighting off predators. So kudu, nyala, impala are a hindrance to them because you get stuck in the vegetation. Just imagine a male kudu like this, with all of these trees back. Going through a area, but the kudu have to run with the males have to run with their heads back in order to prevent themselves getting entangled in the bushes. And so in answer to that question, it's very much to do with habitat points. And the eland is a really good example of this because eland belong to the same tribe as the kudu or the inyala, the same family of antelope, and yet the females have horns in that particular in elands. And that's because they frequent more open, more arid areas, and thus, as that theory shows, need the horns, the females need the horns for protection. The reason why the males in kudus and inyala and impala have retained horns is because they need to fight each other for access to females. There's an interesting little dichotomy at work. Now, Andreen was the one who pointed out how
Hello everyone. Being out in the bush and being out there live has its technical challenges. We're experiencing some of that now and are working on it as fast as possible to get it sorted and get you back on the vehicle with us. Hello everyone. being out in the bush and being out there live has its technical challenges. We're experiencing some of that now and are working on it as fast as possible to get it sorted and get you back in the vehicle with us. Hello everyone. Being out in the bush and being out there live has its technical challenges. We're experiencing some of that now and are working on it as fast as possible to get it sorted and get you back in the vehicle with us.